Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are going to be talking about Super Bullet Break today. This is a cute little deck building roguelike game from PQube. You can get it on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, PC and possibly Xbox. I haven't checked that platform, but you can get it on all the others and it is a delight to play. I have been so busy with very big RPGs in recent weeks, from Xenoblade Chronicles 3 to Digimon Survive to Sword and Fairy and some other ones I can't talk about just yet, that having something like Super Bullet Break there as a break from those games has been really welcome. Because it is a deck building roguelike, you can play it for half an hour at a time and make progress through the game that way. And that feels like a natural way to play it. So it has been that foil. When you're playing these really big games, one after the other, back to back, you do want something that is lighter and easier on the time in between those as a bit of relief. So that has been Super Bullet Break's role for me over the last couple of weeks. You can check out a review I've got on digitallydownloaded.net. The long and short of it is I really did have a good time with this, in addition to being that nice break from the big RPGs. The other great thing about this game is it has gorgeous art. The main kind of, I guess, aesthetic pull to it is that there are 160 characters you collect through it, and each of those characters is a very cute girl in a very advanced state of undress. It's quite fan servicey. You might not want to play this on the train if you're playing it on Switch, but that is the appeal of it. If you're like me and you quite enjoy the fan service, then you do get an additional kick out of that. So in most ways, this is a very good, very enjoyable game that I would immediately recommend to anybody. However, there is one thing I want to talk about, and that is the purpose of this video today, and that is difficulty, because difficulty is very difficult to get right for a roguelike, and I do think that this one misses the mark a little bit there, unfortunately. So as most people know at this point, one of the major drawcards of the roguelike, in fact it's kind of a genre requirement, is that it's difficult. And it's difficult in a way that encourages repetition. So you can get roguelikes that cover any topic these days, from platformers to spacefaring games to whatever else. But most of them are RPGs. So for this example, you will start an RPG at the top of a dungeon. You'll be challenged to delve as deeply as you can go, killing monsters, collecting loot and all that kind of stuff. At some point, a monster is probably going to kill you, at which point you are returned to the start of the dungeon and told to basically start again. The original Rogue, the one that kicked off the whole genre, did not have any progression systems. So when you lost, that was it. You had to start again from scratch and just hope to make it better next time. More modern takes on the roguelike genre do have some kind of permanent progression system in there, so that you do feel like from one run to the next you are getting somewhere. But either way, whichever approach the developers take, the idea is that you are going to fail many, many, many times before you get to the end of the game. The problem with doing that is how you balance the difficulty, because there needs to be a very fine line there. You don't want people to feel too comfortable when playing a roguelike, because the idea is that one move will be the end of you and then that's it, you're back to the start. So there needs to be that threat there. That is where the thrill of the roguelike comes from, the potential that any step of the way could be the end of your run if you're not careful. On the other hand, if you become too frustrating, if it is too irritating and people get stuck at the same point on a run over and over and over again, there is the potential there that they will give up in sheer frustration. That is certainly the case with a lot of the older roguelikes especially, where you will just hit a difficulty wall and you will not be able to kind of understand how to get around that. And because the progression systems on those older games weren't quite up to snuff, you would be basically in the same situation each time as well. So older roguelikes certainly had that problem with frustration. The better, newer roguelikes tend to have ways around that, so that you do feel like you're making improvements. Even if those improvements are only incremental, even if they're just one or two more rooms down the dungeon each time, you do feel like you're getting better at making progress through the game with each run. And that is where roguelikes really hit their sweet spot. The problem with Super Bullet Break is that it lands on both ends of the spectrum depending on what point of the game you're in. So it can be either insanely frustrating to make any progress or feel way too easy to the point that you're almost kind of on cruise control. So the way that Super Bullet Break is broken up is that there are a number of different dungeons, and you can't move on to the next dungeon until you've cleared the existing one. So at the start of the game, there's only one dungeon that you can try. The problem is that is probably the most difficult dungeon of them all, and I say that by a considerable margin. It is incredibly difficult to make progress through that dungeon because you're limited in terms of the character that you can choose. You've just got the one. And a lot of the systems that come into play later on in Super Bullet Break aren't there at the start. So you will be collecting things like heart explosion numbers and combos and all these kinds of things. A couple of the characters that you collect along the way on a run will have those, but they won't mean much to you, and you won't be able to really use them because they're really kind of isolated to one or two characters, and it's just their value relies on you having a lot of the characters in your deck with those abilities. So again, the long and short of it is, and I know that sounds a little bit confusing, it will make sense if you play the game. The long and short of it is you kind of have to blunt force your way through that first dungeon because all the special abilities that come into play in later dungeons are not really available to you. The problem is with that certainly the bosses in particular take a lot of damage, and you've got very little recourse to mitigate against that. So I think on the first dungeon, I would have tried 18, 19, 20, if not more, times to clear the damn thing because I just kept running into these bosses and simply not having the resources I needed to get their health down before they defeated me. There was just no way. The cards that I was collecting, the characters that I had in my party were just not up to snuff. Once I got through that dungeon, things kind of turned around and became almost too easy for a lot of the others, and I would clear them in 3 or 4 runs, if not less. I'm pretty sure there was one of the dungeons I cleared first time, which was unheralded for a roguelike, but they become far too easy because those systems that I mentioned before kick in, and suddenly you have a lot of different ways to approach combat and a lot of different ways to deal with enemies that have a lot of health. So it becomes almost too easy. And that is a problem for a roguelike because, as I said earlier, you need to be challenged. You need to have that sense of threat that will make you consider each decision you make along the way. Otherwise, it's just not that engaging. So that is kind of the unfortunate problem that Super Bullet Break faces, that the tutorial dungeon as such takes away a lot of the tools that you need to play the game effectively and makes everything far too hard when it's meant to be at its easiest. Later on, the difficulty is kind of skewed way towards the player, and some of the characters kind of feel broken so that it becomes an exploitable type of roguelike. You may enjoy it because building a nice deck of cards certainly feels good if you can break the system and just make it that easy for yourself. But as a roguelike, it kind of loses a bit of its thrust, unfortunately. That said, I did really enjoy this game, and it fills that perfect role where it is a low-intensity thing that you can just enjoy in between the other games that you're playing. I will have this on rotation for some time to come yet, because I haven't quite finished with it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, not every game has to be a Game of the Year contender to be enjoyable and to be worthwhile. What this game does well is get the art down. As I mentioned, it's got great fan service, really, really nice characters. The plot is not really great. It could have had a bit of work done there, but it's enough to give you a sense that it's charming, it's bright, it's happy, it's bubbly, it's kind of innocent in the sense that it's not really trying to push boundaries or do anything to challenge you mentally. And it's just enjoyable. So I do recommend it, but I would be interested to hear what other people think about roguelikes and difficulty. I know a lot of people, for example, refuse to play roguelikes because they do find them frustrating, even the ones that are generally celebrated, like Hades or whatever. So does the idea of a roguelike that, once you get through the tutorial, is quite easy. Does that sound good to you as a player? Is that a roguelike that you might get into if you don't usually play the genre? Do let me know. Let's have a chat in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video and want to subscribe to digitallydownloaded.net, then please do so. Hit the like and subscribe buttons. That way you will get to watch the rest of them as we upload them. And if you want to support what we're doing, not just here on this YouTube channel, but also on our website where I do all my written reviews, the podcast that we do every month, and everything else that we do, you can support us on Patreon for just $1 a month or more if you're feeling generous, but the buy-in's $1 a month. And in doing so, not only do you support all of this, which we do for free for everybody, but you also get a monthly magazine, which is full of in-depth features to do with Japanese art, history, culture, not just video games, but also film, literature, music, the works. So that is a good magazine if you're into Japanese art and culture, and it is the cheapest subscription you'll get, and all of that to support us and so we can continue to do what we do here. Thanks everyone, have a great weekend, and we will see you at the next video.